¿Qué pasa, HSI familia? And welcome back to ¿Qué pasa, HSIs? I'm your host, Regina Ann Garcia. And on this episode, we're going to talk about Hispanic serving community colleges along the US Mexico border and the transborder students they serve. What up, fam? In this episode, we're going to continue talking about policies of possibility, and specifically the California policy AB 91, which is a pilot program giving low income Mexicans living within 45 miles of the Mexico California border a non resident fee exemption to attend community colleges in San Diego and the Imperial Valley while paying in state tuition. This policy is in effect for 5 years, starting in 2024, with some already noticeable successes according to the participating community colleges. This policy is similar to those passed in other border states, including Texas and Arizona. According to supporters of the bill, it not only supports individuals in pursuing their higher education goals, especially those who cannot afford to live on the US side of the border, but it also builds the talent pool and economic vitality in the border region, an area in the state that has tremendous economic power. The 9 participating community colleges are identified as HSIs, and most enroll a significant number of Latina students. Today, we will talk about the significance of HSIs along the US Mexico border and the role they play in supporting transborder students. Our guest today is Dr. Mark Sanchez, who serves as the CEO/president of Southwestern College, located in the borderlands of Chula Vista, California, just 7 miles from the US Mexico border. His experience includes 26 years in community college leadership, teaching instruction, and workforce development. Prior to his presidency at Southwestern College, Dr. Sanchez was the vice president of student success and support programs at Cuesta College and also served as the dean of student services counseling at Hartnell College, dean of student services counseling at Fresno City College, and director of student support programs at San Jose Evergreen Valley College. He also has experience in developing educational and career programs at the Fresno County Workforce Development Board and career training programs funded by the San Diego Workforce Partnership. Dr. Sanchez is a collaborative leader who works effectively with constituent groups on campus, businesses, and community-based partners to advance surveyness. I'm so excited to welcome him today. So Dr. Mark Sanchez, thank you for joining us here on ¿Qué pasa, HSIs, where we talk about all things HSIs. But of course, we like to start with you. So tell us first a little bit about you and particularly your HSI journey.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia, and it's an honor to be here with you this afternoon. I'm a huge fan of your work, and so just it's my honor to be here today with you. And so, interestingly, I was born and raised in the San Diego community, and after I graduated from high school in 1989, I chose to attend Southwestern Community College of the same institution I'm now the superintendent president at. I am entering my 6th year starting next month. But the reason why I use the word chose, I think it's a very important message to send to our community and our students. I was accepted to San Diego State University and UC Santa Barbara straight out of high school. But for me, the community college was a place where I felt connected. It was in my home community. And I just felt more comfortable starting as a first generation college student, as starting at the community college level. And I can tell you now it was the best decision I ever made in terms of just really kind of finding myself, my trajectory, and my career path. My mom was a librarian for 35 years, so I was surrounded by a caring educator my entire life, and my mother. And then my father worked in construction. After he was a military veteran in the U.S. Army, he worked in construction for 30 years. So I had the benefit of having a loving 2-parent home in San Diego, born and raised in Barrio Logan, which is a working class community in Southeast San Diego. But coming to Southwestern College and understanding the community, which is a very strong Latino presence in the South Bay or the South County of San Diego, starting my post-secondary education here was long before I even knew it, was already a predestined part of my journey. Never would I ever guess that I would come back and lead the institution 35 years later. And so understanding the community, understanding the challenges that students face here, And then to come back now and lead the institution, I feel like the universe put me right where it wanted me to be. And so I'm very proud and honored to have come back home after working in other parts of the state, which I also loved. And I'll tell you, everything prepares you for the next step, whether you realize it or not. You talked about my experience in community college leadership, but one of the most powerful experiences I ever had in my career to this day was actually as a United States history teacher at LSL High School in Salinas, California. And I taught in the migrant education program where my students were the ones very similar to, if you've ever seen that movie McFarland USA, the students were work in the fields in the morning prior to coming to class. They would come to class all day, and then after class ended in the afternoon, they would go back out and work in the fields. And so the reason why I say that was a powerful experience for me is because as I was teaching them the concepts of United States history, they were teaching me about life,
Mhm.
familia, resilience, ganas. And so they were teaching me just as much as I was teaching them, if not more. And so I'll always be grateful for my time teaching at LSL High School in Salinas, California, which is a predominantly agricultural community. I think 90% of the students at LSL are Latine. And so that experience was critical because it taught me what the trajectory looked like for our students from high school to post-secondary. So
Okay, thank you so much for giving us that background a little bit. It's always good to know the personal about the person we're going to talk to, particularly when they're a college president, right? I get the honor of talking, right? Like you said, you are honored to be here. I am always honored. I get to talk to college presidents who gets to do that on a daily basis. And they are primarily community college presidents. Y'all are always down with me, which I love, and you're always willing to engage in these important conversations. But you're a real person, right? Even though we're like, president, are they real? Yes, you are. And you've been through some similar, right, paths as us. So happy to have you here. So let's talk about Southwestern College, the place that you have full circled, right? Started and came back to. What a cool story. And I want to talk about this idea of being a transborder HSI. Now, this term has not been significantly used by the HSI community, but according to my former doctoral student and now Dr. Esteban Alcala, there are 44 HSIs within 45 miles of the US Mexico border in 4 states. He did his whole dissertation, right, about transborder students. And that's a lot, right? 44 HSIs within 45 miles in 4 states is pretty significant. So I think it's a term worthy of us using and starting to embrace, right? And oftentimes we coin terms here on the podcast and then people start using a lot more, right? That we really should be thinking about these particular HSIs as having a distinct role. So I'm excited to have you talk to us about that, right? So about these ideas of students or transfronterizo are HSIs, right? Transborder HSIs or transfronterizo HSIs. So let's go ahead and talk about that term. What does that term mean to you as a president that is located on a college that is in the borderlands?
yeah, we live in a very rich community. And when I say rich, I mean culturally rich. It's an advantage to have two distinct cultures within 10 miles of one another. Our Chula Vista campus at Southwestern College is located about 7 miles from the San Isidro port of entry. So that's the port of entry that leads you into Tijuana, Baja California. And so it's an interesting dynamic because of economics. And so one of the things one of the things in this region we talk about as a strength is the fact that our economy, our binational economy between Tijuana, Baja California, and San Diego County generates about $250 billion a year in revenue. When you consider goods, services, and trade between the two countries, that in my region is one region, one community separated by an international border. We always talk about it from a strength, from an economic perspective. In this region, being born and raised, we don't always necessarily talk about the advantage of this region from a talent pathway pipeline. That means investing in our communities and education so that the communities that we serve have access to the career opportunities on both sides of the border. And so we haven't historically talked about it from that frame,
Mhm.
but certainly coming in as the president of Southwestern and being from this community, it's certainly been a way that myself and our leadership here at Southwestern have begun to frame these conversations from a talent pathway management pipeline, and that means investing in our communities. And so, so for us, and I just want to focus on one more piece on the economic piece.
Mm,
Many of many of the people who grew up or who have lived in South County, San Diego, are now moving to Tijuana. The reason why they're doing that is very quite simple. It's an economic reason. It's cost of housing. A one bedroom apartment in Chula Vista will go anywhere between $2,800 and $3,200 a month. Whereas conversely, 10 miles south, just on the other side of the border, you can get a one bedroom, two-bedroom apartment for $1,200.
hmm.
You have the inconvenience of having to come across the international border every day. But when some people, that's the only choice they have, they will certainly make that decision. So we want to, the Secretary of Education for the state of Baja gave us some figures in their equivalent K through 12 system. About 35% of their total enrollment in Tijuana and their K through 12 system is US citizens.
Mm,
So it's a dynamic that we have to work with our partners on the other side of the border, namely the preparatorias and the secundarias in Tijuana, but also the universities, because we want to make sure that we're collaborating our ecosystem so that we're effectively serving both sides of the border. So we've also been working with our Mexican universities like CETIS University, which is in Tijuana. That's a WASC accredited university, Western Association of Schools and Colleges. And then you have the Autonomous University of Baja California, which is their state university. CETIS is private. But what we've done is, because some of our students that live in Tijuana come to Southwestern, with the political dynamic that exists right now, they have told us that they no longer feel comfortable crossing the border every day. So what we've done working with our Mexican universities is we've been doing 2+2 articulation agreements, and we're also looking at a dual degree program in international business. But right now, we're currently offering our lower division coursework, our first 60 units in our educational pathway that aligns with the international business degree at CETIS. So a student who lives in Tijuana can take Southwestern College courses at the CETIS campus in Tijuana, finish their first 60 units, and then transfer into the CETIS international business degree and take their upper division coursework. So it's that type of work that we're doing across the border that's really tapping in and developing our talent pathway. We still have a long way to go in our work, but
hmm.
that's really what living in this region is all about, is understanding the needs of our community, understanding the factors that impact their ability to access higher education, and then adapting our program accordingly, so our programs accordingly, so that we can meet the students where they're at.
Wow. You got my brain going, my theoretical brain of thinking, what does a transborder HSI mean? And like you're bringing in something important of you're talking about these partnerships that are cross-border partnerships, right? That you're really working with the community on both sides, right? And really thinking about what it means for the whole. There's no border. There's no, that's made up. It's a made up line. And you're working across that and understanding that. Hey, that's made up. Like we're going to work across.
It's true, Dora, and if I can just tell you one thing, when we center the conversation on the community and on the student, it leads to uh, greater vision from multiple organizations. So interestingly, we had the consulate, the Mexican and U.S. consulate, work together to create an expedited line, so that the students who live in Tijuana and are coming to study in San Diego, they now have, and it's a pilot program that just started this month, but they now have a student line. It's solely for students to cross through that line. And so instead of waiting 2.5, 3.5 hours to cross the border, they can now cross more expeditiously through this student line that has been developed for them. So, it's really just kind of been an impact that started focusing on the students and then has transgressed into other areas to thinking about how we can better serve our binational community.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you also have to have, I'm just going to put it out there, a president like you who's willing to do that, right? Because if we say 44 transborder HSIs, we can't necessarily say that about all, right? There has to be that willingness to, under your leadership, to even do that kind of work. So I want to acknowledge that as well, right? As an important piece of serving this, right? That the president's role is so important, right? As far as thinking about some of these things. So y'all are an HSI. How are y'all embracing that identity and intentionally thinking about servingness, right? What does that mean for you living in the borderlands, being in the borderlands? What does servingness mean for y'all?
It's built into our DNA. It's a long-standing history of our community college because if you really understand the history, and Southwestern College was founded in 1961.
Mm,
So in September we'll be celebrating our 65th anniversary, and so. But if you understand the history of why this college was founded, it was really founded by a grassroots group of community members who wanted a post-secondary option in
mm,
the South County of San Diego. And interestingly, um, 65 years later, we are still the only institution of higher education in the South County, and we're the only community in California with a population of at least 500,000 that doesn't have a public four-year university in our community. So we don't have a CSU or UC or any
mhm,
public university in a community our size, and we're the only community in California that has that interesting dynamic. So what an HSI community means to us at the college is we embrace it. It's built into our DNA. It's the very community that we serve, being 10 miles from the border, but also just being a part of the community where historically the Latina population had a tendency to migrate to and live in because of cost of living. South County of San Diego has historically always been more affordable than other parts of San Diego County, especially when you get closer to the ocean in San Diego, cost of living increases significantly. So the South County of San Diego, the service area that our college serves, has always been the more affordable working class part of the region, and so that's just been built into our identity. But I think you talked about it, Dr. Garcia, is when you talked about having leadership that has a pulse on the
yeah.
needs of the community, the things that impact them in good ways or in bad ways. And not only having the pulse, but then also taking action to redesign our systems to better serve the communities that we serve, so
Mhm,
that we are creating those pathways to opportunities for our region. Now, there's a deep history in San Diego, and I won't go too deep into this, but it is an important point. When you look at the redlining maps from the 1940s, which is a significant indicator in history because that's really when there started to be an economic shift in the San Diego County region. But when you look at those communities that were redlined in the 1940s, it was, if you think of downtown San Diego where the 5 freeway was built, it's essentially all of the communities south of
mm,
downtown San Diego. So it's our service area. And the reason why that's important is because if you look at educational attainment rates for the South County, they have historically been lower than other parts of the region.
mm,
What what that says to me is everything is tied to socioeconomic opportunities and educational attainment. We know those two things are inextricably linked, and
mhm,
there's a historical element to that. So for us, as we think about how at Southwestern, how we redesign and design our programs under new ways, under a new vision to better serve our communities, it's all of those points that are important to consider as we look towards our future, and making sure that we are embracing our binational identity. I would even say trinational because we also have a lot of indigenous communities
mm,
in San Diego County, particularly East County of San Diego,
yes.
and so we have a very good relationship with our Kumeyaay communities. And so also looking at how we create pathways to those communities to Southwestern College as well.
Wow, so complex. As you're talking, I'm like, we might need to put a link to a map. Like San Diego is massive, right? As you talked about, like how big you are and how there's no, right? Because I'm like, oh, you got San Diego State, you got UC San Diego, right? You're all San Diego, but I know San Diego a little bit better, but it's massive, right? It's massive and very different, right? Like even your community colleges, right? Like I've been to Miramar, I think is more on the ocean side, right? And I know they are a very different service area than y'all. So people have to understand that anyway, listening, that San Diego is actually quite massive.
Been quite diverse in terms of experiences and socioeconomics. Yeah.
Yeah, very big disparities, right? Depending on which direction you go. Okay. So let's talk about this AB 91, which gives institutions along the US Mexico border the opportunity to enroll students in Mexico at the in state tuition rate. Tell us about how you were involved with the advocacy efforts for this important piece of legislation.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I'll tell you, and I'm going to bring up some names from the past, but I'll tell you exactly how AB 91 was first conceptualized. In the spring of 2022, Southwestern College was going to do a state of the higher ed system at Southwestern to our community, both internal and external. And it was in my first year of my presidency. And so I wanted to update the overall community on the work that we were doing, our vision, and our focus leading the district forward. And at the time, the chancellor of the California Community College system was Eloy Oakley. And so he came down and was one of the keynotes from the statewide perspective on where the state was going in terms of its priorities for the California Community College system. And so after that town hall, Eloy and I had some time to talk, and he was asking me what the challenges were in this region. And I had just looked at our enrollment data for the district, and I was noticing a pretty strong trend. And of course, it varies by semester, but anywhere between 13 and 16% as a standard of our overall headcount enrollment are students who live in Tijuana. And so that was a problem because what was happening was it was pricing students out of being able to participate in higher education. Because if that's the case, enrollment fees are not based on citizenship, it's based on your residency. So if you live in Tijuana, then technically you're an out of state or you're an out of area, you're having to pay out of area enrollment fees, which is very, very expensive. On average, it's about 3,500 to $4,000 a semester. Whereas if you're an in state resident and you're paying $46 a unit and you're taking 12 units, it's a little over $500 a semester. So a big price difference.
Right.
So I got to give Eloy a lot of credit. He says, they have a law in Texas that they've been doing for decades. And it was a law where the University of Texas, El Paso had a partnership with their border communities. And if in Texas, a resident lived on the other side of the border but wanted to complete their university studies at the University of Texas, El Paso, then they were giving them in state tuition rates. And so it was really the Texas model that was the impetus for AB 91. Our chief of staff, Dr. Zenita Encarnacion, was started to do a lot of research on the Texas model and then really conceptualize what it would look like for California. We went through the legislative process. Our assembly member, our local assembly member, David Alvarez, carried the bill. Initially, we got a lot of pushback on it because it was a regional bill. We really had to tie in how this binational region really contributes to the overall economic vitality of the state as a whole, but also by creating a talented workforce that would benefit the entire state, not just San Diego County. We were able to leverage momentum. And in October of 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom signed AB 91 into law as a 5-year pilot. And so that's really how it came about. And it wasn't just specific to Southwestern, but it was all California, or all community colleges in the San Diego and Imperial County region. So as you mentioned earlier, it's nine community colleges that benefited from that legislation. We're in the second year of the pilot. We are that pilot caps enrollment for each college at 150 full-time equivalent students, or FTES.
Mm-hmm.
We we are already at that cap, but when we collected our success data for those cohorts, we're at a 94% persistence rate for those cohorts, and they have a cumulative GPA. So all of the students enrolled in that program is over 3.0. So they are persisting on to their educational goals and doing very, very well academically. So we certainly want to explore the feasibility of putting this into ed code permanently at the end of the 5-year pilot.
Yes. I was going to ask that. I was like, what happens after the pilot? I want to know, inquiring my mind. So you're tracking those cohorts to be able to show like the success. Yeah,
Yes,
that's gonna be
absolutely.
really important.
That was actually mandated in the legislation, is that we would study it and then bring a recommendation back to the legislature at the conclusion of the 5-year pilot. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome. Thank you. I love
yeah,
I love origin story.
yeah. I mean, that's the truth, and the only way I can say it is because I was there. So
Yeah, no, and shout out to Eloy for being one of the leaders too.
yeah, and I'll be honest, I wasn't familiar that Texas had that model. and he was. So for him to share that with me and for us to have a model to look at that we could replicate. And actually, I think that's what got it because it actually sat on the governor's desk. I think he had until the 30th of October to sign all bills into law, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and we actually went to the 23rd before he signed. But one of the things that we were leveraging with his staffers is that as Texas has had this legislation on the docket for decades, and anything you know about the governor, he's very competitive. And
Hmm.
so I don't think he wanted Texas to have something that California didn't. So he leveled the playing field. Yeah.
That's hilarious. You got to know those things when it comes to policy.
it, it, it's the truth. Now, whether he'll admit that or not, we don't know. But that is exactly how it happened.
Yeah, awesome. It's an important one. So thanks for sharing also some of the successes that we know are not happening. I know y'all gonna have even more successes, right? Even these students transferring on and being able to like, we consider the community college as an important pathway into higher ed, right? But it's not necessarily students' endpoint, right? They go other places. So besides allowing transborder students to enroll in college at the in-state tuition rate, what are other support mechanisms that transborder HSIs can offer students who commute 2 or 3 or 4 hours, and it might even not be miles, right? It's just the time, right? Not that the mileage isn't that far, and maybe just to attend a class or two, right, for a day. So what other kind of support mechanisms are y'all putting in place?
No, and that's a fantastic question, and it's a timely one. When we operationalized Assembly Bill 91 in 2024, one of the things that we started seeing is, and so I talked about the expedited crossing line for students to be able to cross from Tijuana through customs and immigrations in an expedited student line. What was happening was we had students, and we hear these stories. We heard them pretty consistently was students were getting onto campus at about 6:30 or 7 because they had anticipated a 3-hour wait, and fortunate for them that day they only waited about 45 minutes, so they would get to campus at 6:30 prior to our facilities being opened. And that's a problem because now you have all this idle time, so students were sleeping in their cars. They couldn't really have a place to warm up their food that they had brought. So, what we've done in our new student union is we've created these engagement spaces where a student can go into. We have a lounge chair if a student wants to take a nap, if they want to watch TV, microwaves and refrigerators and water and other basic resources where if they want to heat up a meal, if they want to study, if they want to plug in their laptop or their cell phones. And in addition, we in our athletic facilities, we also opened up our showers. So if a student wants to take a shower, but really it's those basic resources that students need just in the time before their class starts and in between classes. So
Right.
they have that space where they can feel connected. And fortunate for us, and I really give all credit to previous college leadership. We had gotten a bond back, a community supported bond back in 2010. And as a part of that, they conceptualized a brand new student union, which just came online in the summer of 2025. And so that new student union is operational and has created those spaces, including a Dreamer Center if a student wants to go to the Dreamer Center, or they can just go to the student union and have access to all of the resources that I just outlined.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about how all these resources, it's the whole idea like HSIs, people are like, we can't just focus on one population. I'm like, when you focus on a population, you think about their needs, but those needs, other students have those needs, right? It's not like just them getting it, right? Like I'm thinking about could be students commuting the other direction for 2 hours who need the same things, right? Or even showers, right? We all know there are students who are in housing insecure on our campuses, right? Like everything you named, I'm like, those are things all students need, right? Not just your students who are crossing the border, right, on a daily basis. Although thinking about them allowed you to think about specific things they would need. So yeah, that's powerful, right? That we end up serving all our students at the end of the
I'm
day.
glad you said that, doctora, because that's exactly right. If
Mm,
it were a student that came into our student union and said, "I'd like to heat up a meal and can I charge my laptop?" We're not going to ask them, "Did you just cross the border?" And that those are only the folks students who these services are available to. It's open to everyone. So you're exactly right. When you create the systems or the conditions through a true Hispanic serving institution, and the servingness piece is really critical, students can benefit from that model. And so you're exactly right.
yeah. I think about the curb cuts, right? Like we always talk about that's like the model, right? The curb cuts. Benefits is
That's right.
all. Benefits is
Yeah.
all that was really needed for people with wheelchairs, right? But the rest of us, people with them strollers, walking, even, wagons, we all need the curb cut. Yep, yep. So how are faculty and staff trained to support these students? Is that something y'all think about too? Like you need to have the whole campus ready to serve students with these different needs.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, our faculty, when the AB 91 bill was going through the legislative process, they were huge supporters. I think one of the things that benefits our South County community is a lot of our faculty were born and raised in this community, went to local high schools. I keep honing in on that part because it's really, really important because when you grow up in a community and it's ingrained in your DNA, you carry that with you into the future. And so those become very important dynamics and not only in most people's personal characteristics, but especially if they get into educational service, when you're serving the community in which you grew up and you understand what the needs are. So our faculty were very in tune with the bill and just equity and advancing equity in general. So our executive director of equity and engagement, her name is Janelle Williams Melendres, has developed with our team an advancing equity and teaching academy for our faculty. And it really is centered on the pedagogy necessary for our diverse student groups, and understanding what their needs are in math instruction and English composition instruction, and how we do that differently for first generation college students, how we do it for different communities that may come from international, may have landed in the South County of San Diego, but grew up in a different country. How do we design our pedagogy and our materials to support students through to success rather than creating these benchmarks that are filtering out student from getting to the end goal? And so that Advancing in Equity Teaching Academy is now 7 years old. I think the total number of faculty, this is instructional faculty and counseling, but we've also developed a classified component of that Advancing Equity Academy as well. But it's in its 7th year and it's trained over 600 people year to date. And so, certainly looking at how we expand that moving forward. And we also included it as an onboarding piece for our new faculty to be able to participate on early on in their tenure at the college. So engaging in those conversations, engaging in that dialogue, but the fact that we started at the college has now spurned other conversations where we're looking at an advancing equity and teaching academy for our local K through 12 feeder districts, and how we create that seamless pathway from our local high school district to our community college. And so
Mhm.
that that eventually led to our first iteration of our middle college in the fall of 2025. So we have about 70 ninth through 12th graders taking their A through G curriculum in the morning and college coursework in the afternoon. But those ninth through 12th graders are taking that coursework on the Southwestern College campus in Chula Vista, California. So all of these things have just spurned larger areas of work. But our faculty and our staff are very in tune with the fact that we need to adjust our systems and how we better serve our students in our community.
Yes. So the thread that goes through all of this when you think about Transfronterizo HSIs community, right? You keep
Yes,
saying, right? Even your
yes,
faculty and staff to be from the community, right? What an important piece of the puzzle
yes,
that they understand the community. Such a specific community with such specific needs, and to know that the people that are serving students understand that, right? And in
yes,
deep level, in deep ways, right? Like deep and meaningful ways.
yes. And I'll say this because it's true and it's a part of my experience every day. And this is where I use the word innate. In other words, it's embedded
Mhm.
in who I am as a person.
Yes.
But there'll be times I'm looking out my window and my office looks out into the courtyard where students walk by. And this is the honest truth. My mind goes back to the fall of 1989 when I was a first time college student. So those students walking by, I see myself in them. And so when that's your frame of reference for how you go about doing your work, and I'm not the only one, there's a whole team of professionals here that have that same frame of reference.
Mhm.
It's a different if it's a different connection and it's a different, I don't want to, well, I'll say the word, it's a different urgency to ensure that our students in our community have access to the best programs and services that are going to lead them onto the pathway that they've set for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Such an important piece. I appreciate it. I love this. Like I said, my theoretical brain's thinking about like, all right, bringing in my colleagues, my some colleagues that have started to think about what does it mean to have HSIs in the border, right? And we need to be advancing this conversation. So glad we're
Yeah.
having it here. So something we got to talk about is the current political climate, right? We can't not talk about it. What are some of the strategies for supporting, caring for, and protecting immigrant and undocumented students as community members in the region as we consider the current political climate?
It's heavy. It's heavy times,
Mhm.
but as leaders of a college institution, I believe that our mandate is to inspire hope even during challenging times. And so I didn't ever want to presume like I knew the answers for what our students were dealing with, even despite the fact that I'm from this community, born and raised. I don't have the same experiences as some of our students who are undocumented or who live on the other side of the border. And so the first thing we did was we sat down with our students and we did focus groups with our students and our dreamer students and had conversations around what their concerns were, where they felt like they needed to be supported. And interestingly, we were conceptualizing a new iteration of our Dreamer Center because I told you our new student union came online in the summer of 2025. And initially, we thought that they would want a Dreamer Center kind of isolated to protect their identities. And after meeting with multiple cohorts of Dreamer students, there was not one student who said they wanted to be tucked away in a corner. They wanted to be right in the center of our student union.
Mhm.
And as long as they felt like the district was, the college was doing its due diligence in protecting them as students, but they did not want to be in another corner. They wanted to be a part of the overall college environment. So, first and foremost, was sitting down and listening to what their concerns were. A lot of it was just security. If ICE was going to come onto our college campus. So we talked about our relationships with local ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. We shared firsthand input that we were getting from those offices about having no intentions of setting foot on any of our campuses and centers. I sent all district communications that were also sent out to all of our student body, but it has to be consistency, it has to be safety, and students have to feel like they're a part of the college culture. They're not isolated, they're not separated, but that we were considering all of those things that they were concerned about. And then I also asked our faculty in the classroom to reiterate those messages in their course syllabi in the first weeks of class, really reiterate that the campus and the classroom is a safe space for them. We have a sworn police force that is also designed to protect our student body as well as our professionals at the district. And so it was just a constant wave of consistent messaging that we understood their concerns. We had their security and safety first and foremost, and that we wanted them to complete the educational and career goals that they had set for themselves. And we were going to make sure that they were in an environment to facilitate that. And we wanted them to see it in words, but we also wanted those students to see it in action. And we have gotten a lot of excellent feedback from our students that they do feel safe, that they do feel supported. Now, I mentioned earlier there were also some students who felt like, and they communicated this with us very clearly, that they lived in Tijuana and they no longer felt safe crossing the border to come to San Diego or the any longer. So then we started looking at programming that we could influence with our universities in Mexico, and then started building articulation agreements with those universities so that students could still have access to our academic programs, but they would be able to have access in their home communities in which they live, where their students go, where their kids go to school, where they work, and really starting to now talk about how we expand programming to serve more of our students that live in Tijuana. So, but it's been a true partnership with our Mexican universities as well. They don't charge us anything to utilize their classroom facilities, and their facilities at those universities are amazing. I've been down there multiple times.
Mhm.
we've been doing this work for a couple of years now. So in 2023, we hosted a graduation ceremony in Tijuana for our students who completed their educational degrees and certificates. And so that was an important touch point for them because many of those students' families could not cross the border to come and celebrate
Yes.
at the commencement ceremony in Chula Vista. So we took it to Tijuana.
Love that. That's amazing. I've talked about mariachi at graduation. That's servingness, right? But taking the whole graduation to the other side of the border, now that's
Yeah,
servingness, right? That's powerful.
it was amazing.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, right? Yeah, just as you're talking, I'm like the level of responsiveness to the population is just like 100%, right? Like y'all are, that's what you're doing, right? You're serving students by being responsive to what they need, right? And that takes like I said, takes leadership that you're able to even see that, envision it, have these partnerships, right? Like your job obviously as president, that's something I learned in talking to presidents so much, right? The partnerships are everything, right? The folks that y'all work with to make stuff happen. It's important.
And there's synergy in our leadership too, and our faculty. I'll tell you, our part of the county in San Diego here is very close knit. Like for example, Chief of Staff Zenita Encarnacion, she lives right down the street from me. My Dean of Institutional Research, he lives across the street. Like we literally can walk to each other's homes. We see each other at the grocery store on the weekends. We see each other at different community venues, and so this is bigger than an 8 to 5.
Yeah.
This is really about community centeredness and being true to what our mission is, and that's really serving our community to the best of our ability.
Yes, that's what you do. Love it.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing I think about right now with this political climate, and particularly in California, we have great policies, right? Like AB 91 is one of many policies that are protecting our students, are focused on equity. How do we protect those policies like under this climate? Like I worry about, we see in other states they could be overturned, and we're not safe in California where right now we are, but we got a governor race coming up and we don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be an interesting one. So how do we protect some of these policies and to ensure that they stay intact regardless of the political climate?
We have to keep the why at the forefront,
Mhm.
and the why is always when we're investing in our communities. I mean, I think that's bipartisan, right? Because even folks in the Republican side of the aisle want a qualified workforce. They want businesses to thrive, right? But if we're not investing in the talent in our communities, then we're missing the point, not only short term but long term. And so I think we have to keep these policies and how they're serving our entire state, and I would even say country, because not all of our talent stays local. We could certainly train an engineer that can go work in Boston,
Mhm.
so, and vice versa. So when we're creating the talent, the workforce talent, and we're creating a surplus in that has to be reflected in our policies, the work that we're doing, our legislative platforms, and then also having the right coalition of the willing in our legislators that are going to be able to have access to those spaces that communicate that why, not only at the legislative level, but the governor also has his trusted circle as well, and making sure that we are communicating these priorities for the state. Um, the difficult part is navigating some of the political landscape because even when the why is clearly articulated, you still run into resistance. And so it's critical to be able to know how to be savvy in working around that resistance so that we're able to focus on making sure that those policies that are positively impacting our communities, positively impacting our students, and positively impacting our institutions of higher education continue to be at the forefront. And I'll tell you, with Governor Newsom's preliminary budget announcement for 26-27 last Friday, I think it gives a very clear indicator that we've been successful at that because he prioritized K through 12 education, prioritized community college and post-secondary education,
Right.
prioritized early childhood education. So
Mhm.
when you look at what he's focusing on, I think we've done a very good job of influencing him, even as he prepares to potentially run for president of the United States.
Mhm.
Very much stayed in tune for the most part with the needs of California. And interestingly, this was something I didn't expect to hear pretty predominantly in his 26-27 preliminary budget proposal is really a focus on affordability.
Right.
That's affordability in housing, affordability in education. So I think we've leveraged our influence and the coalition of the willing to really keep him focused on what the necessary priorities are for California.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I get so worried. I'm like, "Oh my god, it could happen
Yeah.
here." Right? Like some states we're obviously seeing different things than others, but yeah, keeping the Y for and the workforce development. Thanks for bringing that in. I know you have a lot of extensive experience in that area, but you're right. We all want economic vitality. We all want workforce development, right? It don't matter. That crosses political lines, right? That we want to be able to afford to live and we want to be able to make a living and to be able to support our families, right? That's some basics that we can all agree on, right? So awesome. Well, as we wrap this up, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about before we wrap it up?
No, I just, I mean this, I have a tremendous amount of respect for your scholarship and the research that you've done and have even challenged me to think about what servingness really means. I mean, there's one thing to have the HSI designation, which has certainly been under attack at the federal level.
Mhm,
But despite that, how do we still create those servingness colleges that are really in tune
mhm.
with really meeting the students with what they need and how we support them effectively through to the goals that they've set for themselves? Your research, your scholarship has really challenged and been a resource for me as a college president to think about how we do that effectively. And I know a lot of our faculty and our administrators have read your book on HSI serving it.
Mm.
So I can't thank you enough for the work that you do to create that environment and give us the resources we need to make informed decisions.
Aw, thank you. And it's like reciprocal, right? Because like in having this conversation with you, like I keep saying, like my theoretical brain's going because I'm like, everything the stuff you're saying, we haven't written down. It's not in the research. It's not in the servingness framework, right? And so there's that, right? That I learn from y'all in practice just as much as you learn from me in research, right? Because a lot of stuff that is actually happening that's working has not been extensively studied, right? And so it has to be this reciprocal relationship. So I feel honored to be so embraced, particularly by the community colleges here in California, because y'all do, right? Y'all embrace me and embrace the work, and they're like, "Come, Gina, come help us." And I'm like,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, anytime. And this notion that higher education is dead or it's no longer valuable, I'll just cite a data point which debunks that whole, and that might be the case in certain parts of the country. But in our 65-year history, our highest enrollment was in the year 2008, 2009. We were at just over 34,000 head count students. Our academic year that concluded in June of last year, because we're always a year behind on our headcount enrollment,
right,
we finished at about 32,700 headcount students. We're projecting that by the fall of this year, we will exceed that 34,000 number to have the highest level headcount enrollment in Southwestern College's history. And so what that tells us is that students are very much accessing higher education, not only for career pathways, but also for personal development,
right.
to learn because they have a love of learning. And so we will exceed our highest level of enrollment in our 65-year history. So that just demystifies the whole thing about higher education no longer being an asset to our community.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And it's interesting you say that because there's also this like looming demographic cliff, right? We've heard of that as enrollments are going to go down because we've hit this demographic peak, right? And whatnot. And for you to say that is like, no, people are still going to be enrolling, right? Regardless of the attacks on higher, it's still valuable. And the community colleges are great because you provide so many good pathways for people. It's a great option, right? There's a lot of different paths you can go. Awesome. Thank you for joining me today. Before you get off the podcast, though, you have to answer the final question. Final question is the name of the show. ¿Qué pasa HSIs? How do you respond to that?
Get Pasa HSIs couldn't be more relevant today than ever. So yeah, let's keep it rolling and let's continue to ensure that our colleges, universities, and institutions of education are truly Hispanic serving institutions. And so thank you for having me on today and let's go get Pasa HSIs.
Yes, órale. Thank you, Dr. Mark Sanchez.